a really odd thing to try to explain. I had my buddy Phil send me questions to answer, and some of the questions are actually just, I don't mean to say easy because every question is really deep, but when it says stuff like, there's a question, why do we give? I mean, those are obvious answers, and for me to say why we give, that's my opinion, because everyone's opinion is of why we give stuff is different. Some people give stuff in order to receive something back. Some people give stuff because it feels good. I mean, there are multiple answers of why we give, but is the question why should we give? I mean, that would turn into my opinion, because we don't have to do any of those things. We don't have to give anybody anything, but we give because the more we give from our heart, the more it gives a positive vibration in return. It's basically, since we are one, the universal self feels the compassion and echoes. It expands a little. Like when light gets more energy, it's brighter. But when you give something out of love, it causes that love vibration to get brighter or bigger, or however you would call it. So I mean, that may sound weird, but it's not weird at all. But I mean, that was just like one of the questions he asked me. He asked me another question about the pyramids, and since my human mind doesn't know it, like, I was trying to find an answer in my head, and they were like, you're a little worried because you don't know the answer, do you? And I'm like, well, I've seen like a weird vision of how the pyramids were put together, but I never asked anybody. I wasn't able to go into my visions then and talk to people in the place. And they're like, well, try it later. I'm like, because I can't. I'm driving and walking around and doing stuff, and I'm using my brain more because I just woke up. I'm like a little. I ate earlier. I woke up, and my brother's there, and he just had like life problems, and he's moving back in with my mom and dad. I go there to sleep so they can pick me back up, and I love them. I want to hang out with them, you know. The more this has happened, the more I actually just want to spend time with my parents, because, you know, they're important people to me. It's sort of funny for an adult to want to spend time with his parents so much now, but when this happens, the people that matter to you most are the people that have been around you most, who you have the strongest vibration with. So it's like, of course I'm going to go to that area where I feel super comfortable, because if I don't, my vibration is really strong out and about, which is fine too, but my mind just goes wild when I get all the vibrations of everybody around me, and I just start interpreting stuff. So sometimes it's best for me to ground by going someplace where it's like comfortable, serene, and like familiar, if that makes any sense. Like the vibration at my parents' house is very comfortable. It's home for me. I mean, everywhere is home for me, but when I go there, it gives me that sense of comfort. I can be myself. I don't have to worry so much. So it lets my mind go at ease. So I used to say why going out there would be hard for me to do stuff. What's weird is now it's actually sort of easier for me and comfortable, because before, when I went out there, I had that feeling of I hadn't told my dad, and I just felt odd being there. Well, today, my brother Brian was there when I woke up. So then it was like one of those things where I felt the same. I felt the ping, and because as soon as I had woken up, there was messages on my phone with that questions. I mean, one of them was about why we only see one side of the moon and all that stuff. But at the same time, the reason we only see one side of the moon is because we think we only see one side of the moon. You know, people haven't been out there to fucking tell that we're on the moon or not. So just because someone says, well, they said this, and I can tell because every time I look at the moon, it looks the same. No, it doesn't look the same every time I look at the moon. It looks the same because you think it looks the same. It has changed. Everything changes all the time. If you look at Dallas from a long distance away, it's going to look the same, except for like the hue of the light, the hue of the way it's shined on for you to see it. If the moon looked the same all the time, you wouldn't have a half moon, quarter moon, full moon, half moon, quarter moon, full moon, and all the different sizes of moon. You just wouldn't have them. So we don't see one side of the moon at all times. Like, I don't know what kind of question that was. He said, why do we only see one side of the moon? He's asking me questions that are like part of like conspiracy theories or ideas of people that have tried to disprove stuff. And the point is, that's not important. Why the moon? Why people think they only see one side of the moon? We've seen all sides of the moon. It's just that nobody knows that to prove it. I know that, but I mean, I can't prove it. So answering questions like that is not going to help anything, but it's just going to make people like, oh, this guy doesn't know. Because there's no words to put magical, mystical things into words. And since no human being has been there to see it, astral beings can do things that we can't do. And there are beings that landed on other planets, other rocks, that formulated in totally different ways that humans can even imagine. They synthesize. They purposely grow to a certain height and melt down, because when they melt, they turn into a certain substance, and then they solidify as they melt down, and that becomes the ground. There are places that that kind of thing happens. And it sounds so mystical and weird that doesn't seem possible, but it's super possible. There are beings that live and then melt into a dead substance. Like a lot around here, a lot of things live and melt into a dead substance. But say like we use a tree and we mix it with this and mix it with that, or we make paper and it lasts for a really long time. Instead of if you burn a tree, it disappears, or if you burn paper, it disappears, but it can stay around for a really long time. Like different kind of spiritual material and spiritual mineral compounds, gaseous compounds, make different sources of substance. So like just because we only have dirt, rock, and certain things here, other planets have different materials that can reflect different things. So when it's looking at the Earth, a lot of it is a reflection of the Earth in the moon. Oh, no, don't go this way, rabbit. There's a rabbit on the road and I don't want to hit it. Anyway, but how can I prove that? I can't, because I don't need to. And I don't need to go out and get some kind of proof from the moon to show anybody anything. But at the same time, I want to be able to answer the questions people ask. But more or less is one of them things where it's not important. It's just people are so worried of trying to prove something major that they want to answer some kind of crazy question about moons and pyramids. And I did ask them to ask anything. And that's the answer they gave me at first. And they're like, we'll show you, but we can tell you're worried because you don't know. And I'm like I said, I saw visions, but I don't understand how to put that into words, because it doesn't make sense to me, because I can't use that sense in physical yet. I can see myself moving things with my mind. I can see myself flying in the future. I can see myself doing stuff like that. But the mathematics that lead us there aren't there yet, because nobody's done it. So trying to find out something that hasn't been done would be taking a lot of concentration to go into the future, see how we did it, come back. Or to see how something has been done, taking a lot of energy and strength to go into the future, go to that specific point, be in the consciousness area of one of those beings or many of those beings, and see it done, knowing that it's in literal, actual space-time during real life. Like I can see imaginal things, but those are timeless. So if I go into a vision, I don't always, I can actually sense when it's real or not real, but most of the time, it's not real. Like it's one of those things that part of it's real, but a lot of it's not, because my mind is still working and constructing it however. I'm not 100% all knowledge. Just because I've had experiences that make me feel like I'm as strong as the God and Jesus vibration, doesn't mean that I know everything in a physical earth term sense. If that was possible, since all beings are God, all beings would know this. And just because I'm tapped in doesn't mean I have 100% power. And it's one part of the level, or part of the test, is basically to prove yourself. Like that's part of the test. And of course, part of the test was me asking Phil to ask me questions. And part of this test is Phil asking me questions that I don't know the answers to, that I have to believe I'll get the answers to. And it's not like because he asked me now that I'm going to have an answer for it right now. Basically, I have to silence my mind and go into that space and take the time to do it. There's some things that they immediately tell me because my DNA, my spiritual composure knows. But that question, I don't know for sure. So it's basically reassuring me that I'll know, but I have to take that time, quiet my mind, and go to that space. I'm like, wow, that's sort of like they talk to me in deep ways, and more than just giving an answer or not an answer. They talk to me in ways that's like, why would I give you an answer? Why do you think you're having a hard time thinking of it on your own? Why? What do you think? It's always like, when you ask a question, it's like, well, what do you think? You already know that. And it's like, no, I don't know that. Why do you keep saying that? Like, they answer with the question first, because a lot of times when you ask somebody something like, well, why is it like that? And if somebody asks you the question back, if you really think about it, you already know. Most of the time when you ask a question, it's because you're so close to getting the answer, and you just want to be sure. But with stuff like the pyramids, we think we know the answers, and we're not sure. They did move it with vibration and thought, but how? And if I did know that, I'd be able to do it in a physical sense. So for me to try to explain it, the reason that I am not able to is because I myself am not able to, in a physical sense, move stuff. And if I was able to explain it perfectly, we'd be able to move stuff. So there's certain answers that I know, but can't give detailed answers, or else people would be doing things that they shouldn't be able to do yet. You can't grant somebody a power that they're not capable of wielding without harming others. So, like, that's sort of the reply they're giving me. Like, you know that we moved it, you've seen it, but if you know what you have to do in order to do it, which you already know the answer to as well, then people would be doing it. So there's things that you don't want to tell people just yet. People aren't strong enough to know these things. And just because you say it, most people are going to disbelieve you anyway. So it's either going to cause people to not believe you and distance them farther from you because they think you're full of it, or it's going to take a lot of your energy to find it because you want to be completely sure. Like, that's exactly what the answer was for that one. So that was a really in-depth one, but at the same time, it was confusing. And then I come out of my room from sleeping, and my brother was there, and he's apparently just broke up with his girlfriend, and it was like a feeling of, ooh, like there's a cloud of negative energy in the air. And I didn't want to be like, oh, there's negative energy in the air. And I didn't want to be like, hey, bro, I know you're down and da-da-da, because even though I know what's going on with me, it doesn't mean everyone's just going to hop to it and be like, okay, yeah. You know, like, but this is part of his lesson. He's going through this lesson because he's in a loop. He's in a loop of going from a relationship, like falling in love fast, moving in fast, moving everything fast, and then, you know, things coming up and causing issues, just like everything in life. But when you move too quick and you're not ready, things fuck up faster. And that's what he's doing over and over. And like, for me to say that, being his little brother, he's going to take it that way. So, difficult. Very difficult. Anywho, I love y'all. Peace.